It was a beautiful day, and everyone was having a blast at the Easter party by the swimming pool. The host had arranged for everything to be perfect, from the decorations to the food and drinks. The pool was the centerpiece of the party, and everyone was having fun diving, swimming, and playing games. Suddenly, someone noticed a guy standing on top of the high platform for platform diving. He was wearing a bunny costume, and everyone was intrigued by this mysterious figure. The guy in the bunny costume appeared as if he was going to perform a diving stunt, and everyone started to cheer him on. As the guy in the bunny costume jumped off the platform, he spun and turned, executing a perfect dive. The crowd went wild, clapping and cheering in excitement. But as the guy in the bunny costume hit the water, they noticed that the water was turning red. Panic set in as people realized that the guy in the bunny costume was missing. They called the police, and the investigation began. Everyone was shocked that they couldn't find the guy in the bunny costume anywhere in the pool. The water was tested, and it was found out that it was not blood but a red dye. It left everyone wondering who the guy in the bunny costume was and where he went. The host of the party was equally puzzled since he didn't know anything about another diving performance. Was it supposed to be some kind of magic show or a prank gone wrong? No one knew, and the mystery of the bunny costume guy remained unsolved. From that day on, the swimming pool at the party became the talk of the town, and everyone remembered the guy in the bunny costume who disappeared into the red-dyed water. The incident still haunts the guests to this day, and it has become one of the most talked about mysteries in the community.
I was working as a cashier at a coffee shop, and it was closing time. As I was counting the cash and cleaning up, a strange man in an Easter bunny costume barged into the shop. At first, I thought it was just someone playing a prank, but as he came closer, I could sense the hostility emanating from him. He demanded that I make him a coffee, and he wanted it done fast. I explained that we were closed and couldn't serve him, but he didn't seem to care. He was rude and started shouting at me, demanding that I give him what he wanted. I tried to remain calm and polite, but he was getting angrier by the minute. He started to threaten me, saying that he had a gun in his bunny suit and that he would use it if I didn't comply. My heart was racing, and I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know what to do, and I was afraid that if I didn't give him what he wanted, he would hurt me. Suddenly, the power went out, and the store was plunged into darkness. I could hear the bunny man laughing, and I knew that he was up to something. I fumbled for my phone and tried to call for help, but there was no signal. The bunny man's laughter grew louder, and I could hear him getting closer to me. Suddenly, the power came back on, and I could see the bunny man standing right in front of me, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. I screamed and tried to run, but he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back. I struggled, but he was too strong. He whispered in my ear, "I'll be back, and you'll never know when." And with that, he quickly left the store. I quit my job at the coffee shop the very next day and never looked back. The memory of the bunny man still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder if he's out there, waiting for his next victim.
The setting of this story is an Easter party that takes place in an office located on the 6th floor of a building. As the party was in full swing, people began to notice something strange outside. From the office on the 6th floor, they could see the fire escape stairs of the building across the street, and something was standing on each floor. A man pointed it out to everyone, and soon, everyone was looking out the windows to see what was going on. There were 10 bunny costumes standing on each floor of the fire escape stairs, and it was quite creepy. Some people thought it was a prank set up by someone in the other building, but no one could be sure. Suddenly, all 10 bunny costumes began to move in unison. They slowly raised their right arms, then slowly lowered them down. They repeated the same motion with their left arms, and then they all froze again. The scene was very eerie, and it sent chills down everyone's spine. They couldn't figure out what was going on or who was behind this bizarre display. As the party continued, the bunny costumes remained on the fire escape stairs, and the people in the office across the street didn't seem to notice anything unusual. The mystery of the bunny costumes was never solved, and it remains a topic of discussion among those who attended the Easter party that night. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Aaron who loved to dress up in an Easter bunny costume. He would often spend his afternoons crouching down behind the fence of his backyard, waiting for pedestrians to pass by on the other side. When they got close enough, Aaron would jump up and shout, scaring them half to death. He found it hilarious, and would always laugh so hard afterward. One day, Aaron was up to his usual shenanigans when he jumped up from behind the fence, only to see 4 people in Easter bunny costumes standing right in front of him on the other side of the fence. The smiles on their faces were creepy and unsettling, and Aaron stumbled backward, almost scared to death. At first, Aaron thought they were just people trying to scare him back, but as he looked closer, he realized something was off about their costumes. They looked old and worn, and the people inside them didn't move like normal humans. They just stood there, smiling those creepy smiles. Aaron tried to back away slowly, but the 4 Easter bunnies started to approach him. He turned and ran, trying to get away as fast as he could. As he looked back over his shoulder, he saw the 4 bunny costumes disappear behind the fence. Aaron never dressed up as an Easter bunny again after that experience. He learned his lesson and realized that scaring people for fun could have unintended consequences.
Sarah loved taking walks in the woods. She found the peacefulness of nature to be a great escape from the stresses of everyday life. One day, she decided to explore a new trail that led to a bridge over a small stream. As Sarah approached the bridge, she saw something strange at the end of it. It was an Easter bunny costume, just standing there, not moving. At first, she thought it was someone playing a prank or doing a photo shoot, but as she got closer, she realized the costume was looking straight at her. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to shake it off, thinking that it was just her imagination. But the longer she looked at the bunny costume, the more she felt like it was watching her every move. She decided to turn back and head home, feeling unnerved by the strange encounter. But as she started to walk away, she heard a rustling sound behind her. When she turned around, the Easter bunny costume was now standing on her side of the bridge, blocking her way. Sarah froze, unsure of what to do next. She felt like she was trapped, with the bunny costume staring at her with its lifeless eyes. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper coming from the costume, a voice that sounded like it didn't belong to a human. Sarah knew she had to get out of there fast. She turned and ran as fast as she could, her heart racing with fear. She didn't stop until she was safely back in her own neighborhood, panting and sweating from the adrenaline rush. From that day on, Sarah avoided that particular trail and never saw the bunny costume again. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something otherworldly had been watching her that day, something that she never wanted to encounter again.
John was thrilled when he landed an internship at a big video game company. At first, playing video games all day long seemed like a dream come true for him. He provided feedback to game developers, but as the days went by, John started feeling the pressure of having to finish so many games in such a short time. He found himself working overtime every day, and even on weekends. On one Saturday night, John was already exhausted after working for hours. He had just one last game to play before he could finally call it a day. As he turned on the game, he was greeted by a cheerful soundtrack and cute Easter bunnies hiding Easter eggs. It was a refreshing change from the intense games he had been playing all day. As John played through the game, he started feeling drowsy. Suddenly, the Easter bunny on the screen let out a terrifying scream that made John jump in his seat. The bunny's eyes turned red, and the previously cheerful music turned ominous. Feeling spooked, John tried to pause or shut down the game, but the TV seemed to have frozen. He watched in horror as the Easter bunny started moving on its own and making eerie sounds. One bunny turned towards the screen, looking directly at John. The bunny moved quickly towards the screen, as if trying to break through it and attack him. In a panic, John unplugged the TV and shut off the game, and felt a sense of relief. But as he turned around, he was horrified to see a giant Easter bunny costume standing behind him at the door. He let out a scream of terror. The following Monday, employees of the video game company discovered John's lifeless body lying in the video game testing room. The medical examiner determined that his cause of death was due to overwork and exhaustion. The Easter bunny game was never found, and the person in the Easter bunny costume was never seen again.
Kimberly woke up early on Easter Sunday, her excitement palpable as she eagerly put on her bunny costume. She had been planning this for weeks, wanting to spread cheer and happiness on this special day. With a skip in her step, she hopped along the streets, waving and greeting everyone she met. As she looked at the joy in people's faces, she knew she was achieving her goal. However, her happy moment was cut short when a car suddenly zoomed past her, barely missing her by a hair's breadth. With a quick reflex, Kimberly jumped back onto the curb, but in doing so, she twisted her left ankle and fell to the ground. As she lay there, she felt a sharp pain in her side, and upon investigating, she discovered a long nail underneath her. Thankfully, the thickness of her bunny costume prevented the nail from piercing through her body. Despite her injury, Kimberly remained positive and remembered that doing good things often leads to good things in return. After ensuring her left ankle was fine, she continued her walk, spreading joy and happiness, but her heart was heavy with disapproval for the reckless driver. The next day, while reading the newspaper, Kimberly stumbled upon a news article about a car accident that had occurred the night before. Upon looking closely at the photo, she realized that the car involved was the same one that had nearly hit her. She felt a pang of sadness as she read that the driver was severely injured due to their excessive speed. Kimberly couldn't help but wonder if the driver had learned their lesson, and hoped that they would drive more responsibly in the future.
John stumbled down the quiet street, his head spinning from the Easter party he had attended. The neighborhood was deserted, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves. Suddenly, a man wearing an Easter bunny costume appeared out of nowhere and asked John for some money for the bus. Feeling generous and wanting to help out, John handed over some cash and continued on his way home. The bunny man thanked him and disappeared into the night. The next day, John heard the news about a break-in that had occurred in the neighborhood. The owner of the house had caught the thief in the act, and the two had gotten into a brutal fight. The thief, who was wearing a bunny costume, had beaten up the homeowner badly before making his escape. As John listened to the news, his heart sank. He couldn't shake the feeling that the person he had met the previous night was the same one who had committed the crime. The timing was just too coincidental. Feeling guilty for having given the bunny man money, John decided to investigate further. He asked around the neighborhood, trying to gather more information about the break-in and the thief. Eventually, he found a witness who had seen the thief fleeing the scene of the crime. The witness described the man as tall, with broad shoulders and a distinctive tattoo on his neck. John couldn't help but think back to the bunny man he had encountered the night before. He couldn't remember if he had seen a tattoo, but he knew the man had been tall and had a similar build. John called the police and reported his suspicions. A few days later, the bunny man was caught and identified as the thief who had broken into the old man's house. John's hunch had been right all along. From that day on, John learned to be more cautious about trusting strangers, especially those dressed in unusual costumes. He never forgot the Easter Bunny Man and the lesson he had learned about the dangers of letting his guard down.
Once there was a notorious bank robber who always wore an Easter Bunny costume during his heists. He was proud of his successful escapes and would boast about them to anyone who would listen. One day, after yet another successful robbery, the bank robber returned home and hung his bunny costume in his closet. As he was about to fall asleep, he heard strange noises coming from his closet. When he opened the closet door, he saw the bunny costume moving on its own. The bank robber was terrified and tried to flee from the room, but he was too late. A tall figure wearing a bunny costume emerged from the closet and began to chase him. The robber tried to outrun the figure, but it seemed to know his every move and always caught up to him. As the days went on, the bank robber became more and more paranoid. He started to see the bunny figure everywhere he went, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was following him. He tried to get rid of the bunny costume, but it kept reappearing in his closet. Eventually, the bank robber's fear consumed him, and he turned himself in to the police. As he was being led away in handcuffs, he whispered to the officers that the bunny costume was haunted and had been chasing him for weeks. No one knows what became of the Easter Bunny costume or the bank robber, but some say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the sound of bunny footsteps following you.
There was a patient at the mental institution who always wore an Easter Bunny costume. He would spend his nights talking to himself in his room, and the nurses who worked there found his behavior strange and unsettling. Every night, they could hear him talking to what sounded like a pet rabbit. He would say things like, "Your fur is so soft," and "I love petting your white fur." It was all very strange, and it made the nurses uneasy. One night, a nurse walked into his room to check on him and found him talking to himself again. He is again saying that he likes the fur. The nurse saw he is petting the fur on his own bunny costume. One day, the patient was nowhere to be found. The nurses and doctors searched the entire facility, but he was gone. The strange thing was that one of the nurses found a live rabbit hiding underneath the patient's bed. Rumors began to circulate among the staff that the patient had been secretly keeping a rabbit pet in his room without anyone knowing. Another, more bizarre rumors suggested that the patient had transformed into the live rabbit. The security guard settled into his usual routine, patrolling the darkened hallways of the financial building during his graveyard shift. He checked the camera feeds every so often, but for the most part, it was a boring night. No one was around, and the building was quiet. Suddenly, a strange figure appeared on one of the camera feeds. It was a man wearing an Easter bunny costume, walking down one of the hallways. The security guard was taken aback. He couldn't believe there was an intruder in the building. He rushed to the location of the camera and yelled out, "Who's there?" But there was no response. He searched the area, but there was no sign of the bunny man. Feeling uneasy, the security guard returned to the security room, only to see the bunny man on another camera feed, walking down a different hallway. This time, the bunny man seemed to be moving closer and closer to the security guard's location. The security guard's heart raced as he watched the bunny man move closer and closer on the camera feed. He tried to radio for backup, but the communication was garbled and unintelligible. He was all alone, with no one to turn to. Suddenly, the bunny man appeared in the hallway outside the security room. The security guard froze in fear, unsure of what to do. The bunny man stood there, motionless, staring straight at him with empty eyes. The security guard tried to reach for his weapon, but it was too late. The bunny man lunged at him, grabbing him by the throat and choking him mercilessly. The security guard struggled to break free, but it was no use. He gasped for air as the bunny man tightened his grip, his vision fading to black. When the police arrived the next day, they found the security guard lying on the ground, lifeless and cold. They searched the building, but there was no sign of the Easter bunny man. To this day, no one knows who he was or what his motive was for terrorizing the security guard. But one thing is for sure, the bunny man was never seen again.